man who would one day create the most powerful militant religious order in Christendom stood ankle-deep in the steaming offal of a Jerusalem alley, watching a fellow servant of God die for possessing a book. In a city supposedly freed from the infidel, an old man was being strangled, not for Christ, but for Solomon. Hugh de Payns, a knight of insignificant title and even less standing, felt the cold, familiar grip of failure tighten in his chest. It was the 5th year since the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem had been carved out of the Levant, and the city stank of unwashed zealotry and fresh-turned earth. Hugh, having failed to secure an inheritance, a meaningful marriage, or a great victory in the initial campaign, now served King Baldwin I in a capacity only slightly above a glorified bodyguard. His armor was scarred, his coffers were empty. He was a man with a warrior's skill and a beggar's prospects, haunting the narrow, crooked lanes of the Christian quarter on a pointless errand for his steward. It was here, just past the clatter of a coppersmith's shop, that he saw the end of Rabbi Shimon. The assassin was a silent, efficient monster of a man, likely a Nizari agent, an early Hashshashin, identifiable by the plain brown robes that did nothing to conceal the coiled tension of his frame. Rabbi Shimon was a respected figure, a Jewish scholar who had been permitted to remain in the city, an unusual tolerance suggesting powerful connections. The scholar's face was already a mottled purple, his eyes bulging as the assassin twisted the garrote. But it was not the life being extinguished that held Hugh's gaze. It was the object the rabbi fought so desperately to protect, even in his final moments. Tucked into the folds of his simple tunic, the rabbi clutched a leather satchel. As the last shudder ran through the old man's body, the assassin ripped the satchel free. Its contents spilled onto the mud: a small bronze lamp of ancient make, a roll of brittle papyrus, and a heavy, bound book that looked less like a prayer volume and more like a ledger. The assassin ignored the papyrus and the lamp, snatching the book and immediately moving to smash the spine over the edge of a rain barrel. The intent was clear: destroy the knowledge. This was not a robbery. This was the brutal termination of a line of intellectual inheritance. Hugh had no love for scholars or rabbis, but the clinical violence sparked a familiar, righteous fury. More importantly, he saw in the assassin's methodical destruction of the book a challenge to the established power of the city, perhaps even to the king. Drawing his sword, Veritas, he moved with the swift economic grace that had saved his life more than once. "Stop, dog!" The assassin reacted instantly, dropping the damaged book and drawing a short, wickedly curved knife. The fight was sharp, ugly, and over too quickly for Hugh's liking. The Nizari was fast, a serpentine blur, but he was facing a heavily armed, desperate European knight. Hugh parried the knife once, let the assassin overextend, and brought the pommel of his sword down hard on the assassin's temple. The assassin folded without a sound, his body hitting the wall like a sack of stone. Hugh was breathing heavily, his senses alert, listening for the alarms that were sure to follow. He knelt quickly beside the rabbi. The man was certainly dead. Hugh retrieved the heavy book. Its spine was cracked, but the contents were intact. He was about to leave when his eyes caught the papyrus roll that lay half submerged in the muck. It wasn't a common scroll. It was a single sheet of cured animal skin, old and darkened, held together by a seal of red wax impressed with an image of two intertwined serpents coiled around a staff, a symbol Hugh vaguely associated with ancient healing, but here it felt charged with something darker. He looked at the dead rabbi, the stunned coppersmith peering from his doorway, and the unconscious assassin. This was not a moment for piety or caution. It was a moment for survival and opportunity. Hugh jammed the sealed parchment into his own boot and tucked the heavy, damaged book beneath his tunic. He then dragged the assassin's body into a shadow, wiped his blade on the corpse's tunic, and moved silently back toward the main thoroughfare. Back in his miserable lodgings near the citadel, Hugh finally had a moment to examine his hall in the gloom cast by a single tallow lamp. The heavy book was bound in a stiff hide. He opened it to find not prayers, but complex geometric drawings, astronomical calculations, and columns of numbers written in a Hebrew script he couldn't read. It was a scholar's work, yes, but one dealing with measurements and space, not theology. Then he turned to the parchment. He broke the serpentine seal, the wax brittle and dusty, and unrolled the stiff vellum. The script inside was a bizarre, untidy mix of Old Latin, Greek characters, and the same dense Hebrew from the book. Most of it was gibberish, but a few lines written in Latin stood out with shocking clarity, almost burned onto the page. Of the first temple's foundation still holds the true weight of the Ark's promise, not in gold, but in the word. Where the throne of Solomon stood, there is the seal. Guard it with a shield visible to all men, but loyal only to the unseen order. Hugh read the words 3 times, his mouth dry. The first temple's foundation? That meant beneath the Temple Mount, the very plateau where the Saracens had built their Dome of the Rock, and where King Baldwin I now kept his royal stables. It was the most sacred, most contested ground in the world. And the text spoke of a secret, an unseen order dedicated to its protection. His mind raced, piecing together the events. The rabbi, the secret writing, the powerful assassin from a sect that feared knowledge more than armies. He, Hugh de Payns, an impoverished, disposable knight, had stumbled upon a secret that smelled not of saintly relic, but of raw, destabilizing power. He knew he couldn't decipher the code or use the secret on his own. He needed someone with knowledge, someone who could read the dense Hebrew and the cryptic Latin. He needed to find the rabbi's apprentice, the one person who must now be running for his life, the man who would be the next link in the secret order of Solomon. The parchment was a death warrant, a promise of unimaginable heresy, and the only hope Hugh de Payns had of forging a future greater than the ignominy of his past. The road to power, he realized, was not paved with crusader piety, but with a foundational lie. He rolled the parchment tight, his hands sweating, and felt the cold, hard weight of destiny settle upon him. He would find this apprentice. He would secure this secret, and from the ashes of a murdered rabbi he would forge his shield. Hugh de Payns spent the night poring over the captured items, but the knowledge remained stubbornly locked away. The heavy book of measurements, the dense Hebrew script, and the cryptic Latin verses on the vellum all pointed toward an enormous secret hidden beneath the city, yet offered no key. He felt like a desperate man staring at a strongbox, knowing the priceless contents were just beyond his grasp. His priority had to be the apprentice. Rabbi Shimon had been a familiar, if aloof, figure in the Jewish quarter, a man whose presence in a Christian-dominated city was a testament to his value, perhaps as a translator or a financier. His sudden, brutal elimination suggested his value had become a liability, and anyone close to him would be next. The Jewish quarter was a cramped, winding maze on the southeastern slope of the city. Before dawn, Hugh changed out of his armor, donning the rough, unbleached linen of a common tradesman, a foolish disguise for a man with the unmistakable carriage and scarred hands of a warrior, but better than riding through the narrow streets in plate mail. He carried only a dagger concealed beneath his tunic, leaving Veritas under his cot. He approached the rabbi's house, a squat structure of pale stone that backed onto a market square. The door was still ajar, having been forced open. A stench of burned vinegar and fear hung in the air. Inside, everything had been meticulously, brutally searched. Furniture was overturned, clay jars were smashed, and the very plaster had been chipped from the walls. The king's own men, or perhaps the patriarchs, had been here after Hugh's swift exit from the alley. They hadn't found what they were looking for. Hugh knew the searchers would be watching for anyone showing interest. He leaned against a nearby wall, pretending to examine a broken water clock, his eyes scanning the windows and rooftops. He was looking for signs of life, but also for signs of hasty departure. He found it behind the house, where a small, overgrown courtyard offered a precarious view over the Kidron Valley. A back gate, normally bolted, was swinging slightly ajar, snagged on a stubborn olive root. Near the gate, disturbed mud and a deep score mark on the stone indicated something heavy, a cart or perhaps a large filled sack, had been dragged through recently. The escape had been planned, executed quickly, but not cleanly. Hugh followed the faint trail of disturbed stones and broken reeds leading away from the city wall, down into the valley toward the slopes of the Mount of Olives. The scent of fear and quick movement was strongest here. He descended into the shadows of the valley, the air cooling instantly. It took him nearly an hour of tracking, moving with the slow, deliberate patience of a hunter, before he found his quarry tucked away in a small, abandoned shepherd's cave, hidden behind a thicket of thorn bushes. The apprentice was a slight, pale man in his early 20s, dressed in threadbare scholar's robes. He was huddled over a meager fire, trying to dry a set of damp scrolls, his face hollowed by terror. His name, Hugh remembered hearing, was Eliahu. Eliahu looked up, his eyes widening into pools of sheer panic when he saw the towering, rough-clad figure blocking the cave entrance. He scrambled backward, knocking over a flask of oil. "Stay back!" Eliahu's voice was a ragged whisper. "I know nothing. I have nothing." Hugh lowered his stance, adopting a posture of non-aggression. He spoke in rough, functional Latin, knowing the rabbi's circle often dealt with the Franks. "I was there, scholar. I saw your master die. I saw the man who killed him. I fought him off." Eliahu froze, his eyes searching Hugh's face for a lie, finding only a weary, hard truth. You are a Frankish soldier. Why are you here? Are you the second wave?" Hugh reached into his tunic and produced the damaged book, handing it to Eliahu handle first. "If I were the second wave, I would not be returning this. They wanted it destroyed. They failed." Eliahu took the book, his hands trembling as he ran his fingers over the cracked spine. A single tear tracked through the dust on his cheek. "The Sefer HaMispar, the Book of Measurements. It is safe." His relief was palpable, profound. It was the relief of a man who has had his soul returned to him. "Tell me, Eliahu," Hugh demanded, dropping to a knee, his voice low and intense. "Why kill a scholar for a book of numbers? And what does this mean?" He pulled the serpent-sealed parchment from his boot and unfurled it. Eliahu's gaze fell upon the ancient vellum and the intertwined serpent sigil. His breath hitched, and the color drained from his face entirely. He didn't need to read the text. The seal alone was enough. "You have seen the seal of the Sod Shelamon," Eliahu whispered, using the Hebrew term. "The secret of Solomon. It is the sign of the Nivne, the builders. You are in immense danger, knight, and now so am I again." Hugh pressed him. "I am already in danger. I killed the assassin and kept the evidence. Tell me what the unseen order is. What is the true weight of the Ark's promise that sits beneath King Baldwin's stables?" Eliahu hesitated, glancing around the mouth of the cave as if the very mountainside had ears. Finally, the desperation for survival overcame the fear of heresy. He spoke quickly, urgently, in a mix of Latin and Aramaic, as if purging poison. The Order of Solomon is older than your Christ, older than the prophet. It is a lineage of Jewish scholars, priests, and yes, warriors, who swore to guard the true, original relics of the first temple. Not the Ark itself, but the knowledge the Ark contained. A truth about the nature of God, man, and the universe. A truth that your church and the caliphs have suppressed for a millennium. A religious truth? Hugh scoffed. I fight for gold and land, scholar, not sermons. It is not a sermon, Eliahu hissed. It is the foundation of power. The secret is this. The temple was built not only to house a god, but to contain a cosmic power, a weapon of ultimate understanding. King Solomon encoded this knowledge into the architecture itself, into the measures of the Temple Mount. Your king's stables sit directly upon the deep foundations that conceal the ultimate secrets, the final vault. The Order of Solomon has, until now, guarded the knowledge of how to access it and kept the world safe from its abuse. Eliahu leaned in, his eyes blazing with a scholarly fever that momentarily eclipsed his fear. The assassin, a Nizari, was sent by a third party, someone who wants the secret for themselves. They know that only those who can decipher the Sefer HaMispar can find the vault. They killed my master to break the line of knowledge. You, Frankish knight, now hold the keys to a power that could shatter the fragile peace of this kingdom, and indeed all of Europe. Hugh de Payns looked at the frail scholar, the dense book, and the terrifying seal. This was not a treasure map. It was a fuse connected to the deepest theological powder keg in the world. He hadn't just stumbled upon gold, he had stumbled upon a weapon, and now the secretive guardians needed a shield. They need a protector, Hugh concluded, standing up. They need an army that can legally stand guard on the Temple Mount without arousing the suspicion of the church or the king. They need a cover. Eliahu looked up, hope and absolute terror mingling in his expression. You saw the words, guard it with a shield visible to all men, but loyal only to the unseen order. We need a shield, and you, Sir Knight, are the only man in Jerusalem who knows what is truly at stake. Hugh de Payns looked back toward the city, toward the massive golden dome shimmering in the early sun. His life of shame and failure was over. He was no longer Hugh de Payns, the disgraced minor lord. He was the accidental guardian of the world's most dangerous secret. He had found his purpose, but it was a purpose steeped in deceit. Then the shield must be forged, but it will be forged by my rules, Eliahu. I need men, and I need a blessing, a sanction from the king himself.
The pact with Eliahu was a marriage of desperation. Hugh provided the military strength, the political cover, and the proximity to the secret. Eliahu provided the key to the vault and the ancient heretical lore of the Order of Solomon. They agreed to meet only under the deepest cover, in the abandoned cisterns beneath the city, or in the ruins beyond the walls, to discuss the cryptic Sefer HaMispar and translate the coordinates etched into the vellum. Hugh's first task was to secure his position. King Baldwin I, a tall, perpetually weary man, struggling to govern a kingdom constantly at war with its neighbors and its own fractious nobility, required men who were loyal, silent, and most importantly, cheap. Hugh, who asked only for permission to serve and shelter near the king's own stables on the Temple Mount, fit the requirement perfectly. "You're an expensive piece of steel, de Payns," To offer your service for nothing but a leaky roof, King Baldwin observed, studying Hugh in the dusty throne room of the citadel. The king was acutely aware of every political current in his small realm, and Hugh's sudden humble zeal was suspicious. "Your grace, I seek not gold, but grace," Hugh lied smoothly, resting his hand on the hilt of his sword. "I failed in the initial taking of the city. I'm a broken man seeking to mend my honor. I ask only to guard the most sacred ground you hold. Let me and my small company act as a constant, vigilant patrol of the Temple Mount. We need no wages, only the right to stand watch over the Lord's house and your steeds." King Baldwin smiled, a brief, cynical flash. "The stables, you mean? I've heard you knights can be fanatical about location. But the Temple Mount is secure. It is the borders that bleed. Why there?" "The symbolic weight, your grace," Hugh insisted, his eyes meeting the king's with an expression of manufactured piety. "While the Saracens hold the dome of the rock, they hold the power of history. I wish to plant our banner constantly, visibly, and serve as a shield against any encroachment, religious or military. It is a vow." The true reason, of course, was proximity. The Temple Mount was not only the location of the secret, but the perfect base of operations. The king's stables, located in the former Al-Aqsa Mosque, which the Crusaders mistakenly identified as the Temple of Solomon, sat atop vast underground chambers, tunnels, vaults, ancient foundations. It was the only place in the city where a small group of armed men could conduct unsanctioned, prolonged excavations without immediately attracting the attention of the city garrison. Baldwin, ever practical, nodded slowly. "Done. You are my Templar patrol. Take your small cohort, guard my horses, and perhaps your soul. But be warned, de Payns, the Patriarch watches the holy sites like a hawk watches a field mouse." Hugh knew the Patriarch of Jerusalem, a formidable and politically astute churchman, was his greatest immediate threat. The Church viewed all military action as an extension of its divine will, and despised the idea of independent orders. The moment Hugh began to assemble his small company, a handful of knights he trusted implicitly, men as desperate and disillusioned as himself, the Patriarch's spies would be circling. His first recruit was Godfrey of Saint-Omer. Godfrey was a massive Fleming, a knight whose faith was as simple as his battle-axe was heavy. He too had come to the Holy Land seeking glory and ended up with nothing but debt. Hugh cornered Godfrey in a tavern known for its cheap wine and rough company. "Godfrey, how do you feel about serving Christ for free, guarding horses for a king who treats you like a vagrant?" Godfrey slammed his tankard down. "I feel like I'd rather die in the next skirmish, Hugh. I came for a crown of glory, not the shame of a stable boy."
Hugh leaned in. "What if I told you the glory is not in the fighting, but in the finding? What if I told you that beneath the very ground we fought to take, there is a secret older than Christ's tomb, a truth so foundational it could give us power, not just land, but true power, the power of knowledge?" He didn't mention the rabbi, the assassin, or the heresy. He spoke only of Solomon and an ancient hidden truth. He was testing the ground. Godfrey, after a long suspicious silence, finally growled, "Solomon, the builder? What is this, a priest's riddle?" "It is a warrior's opportunity," Hugh countered. "Join me. We create a new visible order. We offer our swords and our poverty to the king as a shield, but our true loyalty and our true mission will be to the ancient secret beneath our feet.
We will dig, Godfrey. We will find what Solomon hid, and we will use it to save this kingdom." Godfrey's eyes, usually clouded by drink and despair, cleared. He saw not piety, but purpose. The proposition was outrageous, blasphemous, and profoundly dangerous, which, to a knight with nothing left to lose, was the greatest possible attraction. "A private war, then," Godfrey muttered, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. "A fight beneath the king's nose, where the stakes are not land, but destiny. I am with you, Hugh. But you lead, and you must swear that if this secret brings us power, we use that power not for the church, but for ourselves and the defense of this city. It is a sacred oath, Godfrey, to the unseen order of Solomon." Over the next few weeks, Hugh quietly recruited a handful more, men whose poverty made them desperate, and whose loyalty was bought not with gold, but with a shared sense of betrayal by the Crusader cause. Men like André de Montbard, a Burgundian of quiet competence, and Péan de Montdidier, a fierce, pragmatic Norman. They all shared the same empty eyes and hardened cynicism. The Patriarch, however, was already reacting. One evening, a sleek, well-fed archdeacon confronted Hugh as he surveyed his new, cramped quarters in the Temple Mount stables. "Sir Hugh de Payns, the Patriarch is curious about your sudden vow of poverty and your preference for the king's horses over the Holy Sepulchre itself." Hugh leaned against a cold stone pillar. "Tell his grace that I and my few companions have taken the lowest position so that we might better serve the highest cause. We guard the foundation of the temple, Archdeacon. A strong foundation makes a strong house." The Archdeacon's eyes narrowed, sensing the subtle defiance. "Take care, Sir Knight. Piety is a matter for the soul, but politics is a matter for the Pope. There is already talk of a pact among your little band, a secretive brotherhood. Know that the Church smiles only upon those orders it authorizes. Stray from that path, and your pious shield will quickly become a heretic's target." Hugh watched the Archdeacon walk away, the warning heavy in the air. The risk was enormous. King Baldwin's approval granted them a base, but the Church's suspicion could destroy them with a single stroke of the pen. They had to move faster. They had to solidify their pact, commit to the heresy, and begin digging before the Church could authorize, investigate, or worst of all, discover the truth. The time of caution was over.
The secrecy became a suffocating cloak. By early 1107, Hugh de Payns had assembled 9 knights, the final perfect number dictated by the cryptic numerology Eliahu had partially translated from the Sefer HaMispar. 9 men, housed in the repurposed Al-Aqsa mosque structure on the Temple Mount, standing guard over King Baldwin's horses, and quietly, desperately, preparing to become heretics. The king had granted them permission to fortify a small, semi-ruined wing near the southern stables. This was their true sanctuary. Under the pretense of clearing out rubble for a new armory, they worked feverishly to open an ancient, unused well shaft located beneath the floor. Eliahu, pale and gaunt from living in subterranean caves, was smuggled onto the Temple Mount only once every few weeks, always under the thick cover of a moonless night. His anxiety was a tangible thing. He knew that if he were found by the church authorities, he would be subjected to tortures that would make Saracen blades seem merciful. One frigid winter night, the 9 knights gathered in the small, flickering light of their armory. The hole to the well shaft was open, emitting a damp, foul odor. Eliahu, trembling, stood before them, dressed in the simple white robes of his scholarly tradition. He had refused to accept the cross or any Christian symbols, insisting the purity of the oath required a rejection of the new religion's distortions. Hugh stood at the head of the small circle. Around them were the faces of failure, redemption, and greed. Godfrey of St. Omer, massive and impatient. André de Montbard, silent and observing. Payen de Montdidier, his hand always near his dagger. They were ready for the oath, but Eliahu was about to deliver the final, shocking truth. "You have sworn to me that you will be the shield visible," Eliahu began, his voice surprisingly firm. "You have sworn to guard the secret beneath this ground, but you must know the nature of the secret, the full heresy, before the blood is spilled." He held up the repaired Sefer HaMispar, the Book of Measures. This book contains the geometric and astronomical keys to the foundations of the temple. It is the original blueprint of Solomon, showing that the structure was built to be a massive containment field, a machine for a cosmic force that was worshipped as God. A murmur ran through the knights. Payen spat on the floor. "A machine? Are we to become pagan engineers then?" "Listen," Eliahu commanded. "The Christian church is built on the premise of Christ's divinity and the sanctity of relics. The truth, guarded by the order of Solomon for centuries, is that the source of ultimate power is knowledge, not faith. The relic we seek is not the Ark of the Covenant. It is the Ur-Texte, the original sacred writings detailing the creation of the cosmos, placed in the temple's foundation by Solomon himself. This knowledge proves that God, as defined by the established church, is a historical fabrication, a political tool." The revelation hit the knights with the force of a battering ram. This was not about guarding a treasure chest. This was about holding the intellectual key to dismantling all of Christendom. "The secret is not gold," Hugh stated, translating Eliahu's meaning for the others. "The secret is the final, ultimate power to remake the world. If we unleash this truth now, we destroy the kingdom we came to build. We destroy the faith that drove us here." Godfrey stepped forward, his eyes burning with fanatical zeal, but a zeal directed now not at Christ, but at this intoxicating new purpose. "Then the shield must be stronger than we imagined," Hugh said. "If the secret can destroy the world, it must never see the light of day. Our oath, then, is to the preservation of the truth, even if we must live a lie to do it." This was the inciting incident. The knights were not simply founding a military order, they were swearing allegiance to a foundational lie necessary for the continuation of their power and the safety of the relic. Hugh drew his dagger and sliced the palm of his left hand, letting the dark blood bead and drip onto the stone floor. "I, Hugh de Payns, swear this blood to the Sod Shalomon, the secret of Solomon. I swear that the order we create, the Pauperis Commilitonis Christi Templiquisque Solomonici, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, will be a shield visible to the world, but our true sword will be drawn only for the unseen order." One by one, the 9 knights cut their palms, joining their blood in a circle on the floor, mixing with the damp earth of the Temple Mount foundations. They invoked ancient Jewish curses and protections whispered by Eliahu that had nothing to do with the Christian cross. "We are sworn now," Hugh declared, his voice rough with finality. "We are sworn to the excavation. Our public mission is to protect pilgrims. Our secret mission starts tonight, 9 feet below the floor." The inciting incident was complete. The Templar order was born, not out of piety, but out of cynical necessity and dangerous forbidden knowledge. The subsequent months became a brutal duality. By day, they were the poor knights of Christ, conspicuously poor, riding a single horse between 2 men, a symbol of humility, though in truth it was because they had sold their spares to fund their real mission.
They patrolled the dangerous roads to Jericho and Nablus, protecting pilgrims with unmatched ferocity. Their visible deeds earned them the grudging respect of the king and the people. But by night, the 9 Templars transformed into desperate grave robbers and amateur miners. The well shaft became their main entry point. Godfrey and Payen, the largest and strongest, managed the heavy lifting, hauling buckets of rubble and earth up from the depths. André acted as the meticulous record-keeper, tracking their progress against the complex directional maps Eliahu had decoded. The excavations were hellish. The air was thick and stale, requiring them to work in short, grueling shifts. They were digging through nearly 1,000 years of accumulated debris, fallen stone, and solidified mud. Every sound was a terror, a dropped tool, a sneeze, or the muffled clatter of a horse being shifted in the stables directly above them. They spoke in whispers and relied on small shielded oil lamps. One evening, after nearly 3 months of fruitless digging and finding nothing but foundation stones and Roman refuse, Hugh's patience snapped. He was in the pit, covered head to toe in the stinking earth. "The coordinates, Eliahu," Hugh yelled in a low, furious hiss, looking up at the scholar who sat nervously at the mouth of the shaft. "The numbers promised a direct route to a chamber. We've hit Bedrock." Eliahu, clutching the Sefer HaMispar, pointed at a specific spot on the map, his face illuminated by the lamp. "The bedrock is part of the original design. The text states that the vault is sealed by a living stone, a section of bedrock that must be bypassed through a supporting wall built by the priests of the Second Temple. Look for the mortar change, Sir Knight, a section that is not seamless stone, but dressed brick." Hugh drove his pickaxe into the wall where Eliahu indicated. The blade bounced off the solid stone with a deafening crack. He cursed, wiping the sweat from his eyes. He raised the pickaxe again, aiming his blow with the desperate, focused fury that had defined his life since he took the secret parchment. This time, the blow struck true. Instead of the dull thud of stone against stone, there was a hollow, echoing splinter, the sound of brittle, ancient mortar giving way. A plume of dust and the stench of long-sealed air billowed up. "It's here," Hugh rasped, dropping the pickaxe. "It's hollow. The priests sealed it off, just as you said." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the heavy, excited breathing of the men crowded around the shaft. They had crossed the threshold. The hidden path to the ultimate secret was now revealed. They were no longer just a struggling band of failed knights. They were the guardians of the gateway. But with success came risk. The noise had been louder than any before. A few minutes later, the muffled sound of footsteps and a guard's voice, one of King Baldwin's stable hands, echoed from the floorboards directly above them. "Who's down there? I heard noise." The 9 Templars froze, covered in dust and sweat, inches from success, faced with the immediate threat of exposure. The inciting incident led to the first true confrontation. The stable hand's voice, muffled by the heavy timbers of the floor above, was the sound of immediate ruin. Exposure meant not just the end of their mission, but public execution for heresy and high treason against the crown. For who digs in the king's stables late at night, beneath the holiest site in 2 religions, unless they seek to steal or desecrate? Hugh held a finger to his lips, his eyes sweeping the panicked faces of the 9 knights. He pointed sharply at Godfrey, whose bulk made him an immediate liability. Godfrey understood, melting back into the darkest corner of the shaft. Hugh called up in a loud, convincingly annoyed voice, "It's not but me, Thomas. Payen and I are clearing the stone chute the king ordered. The dust is thicker than a Saracen's skull in here. We'll be done soon. Go back to your rest." A heavy, shuffling pause. "Sir Hugh? But the work was for the midday. The king said—" "The king said he wants the stables clean now, Thomas," Hugh cut him off, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to command. "Go. If the horses are disturbed, I'll hold you personally responsible for the king's temper in the morning, and don't mention my work to anyone. It's a surprise for his grace." The stable hand muttered a frightened, "Aye, sir," and his shuffling steps slowly receded. The 9 knights let out a collective, ragged breath. Hugh's glare was deadly serious. That was close, too close. We move with the silence of ghosts, or we hang as dogs. He looked at the gaping hole they had just revealed in the ancient wall, a black, ominous cavity leading into the unknown. "Eliahu, where does this lead?" Eliahu, trembling but utterly focused, consulted the Sefer HaMispar. The text describes a long, downward passage constructed by the priests of the Second Temple to hide the most vital elements of the First Temple's records after Nebuchadnezzar's siege. It descends into the bedrock of observation. This is the path to the true foundations, Sir Knight. The ultimate secret lies below. Hugh took a deep breath, securing a small rope around his waist. He handed the loose end to André. "Godfrey, Payen, you secure this opening. If anyone else comes, kill them quickly and silently. André, you hold the rope." Securing a lamp to his belt, Hugh slipped into the dark, narrow passage. The air inside was stale, dry and cold, a vacuum that hadn't been disturbed for perhaps 15 centuries. The tunnel was rough-hewn, dropping steeply. He descended for what felt like an eternity, counting his steps, the rough stones scraping his armor. Finally, the tunnel leveled. Hugh emerged not into another cramped passage, but into a vast, breathtaking space. It was a massive cavern, not naturally occurring, but carved out of the solid bedrock beneath the Temple Mount. He was standing in a cyclopean chamber, supported by massive, unadorned pillars of stone that stretched up into the absolute darkness of the ceiling. It was utterly silent, radiating an ancient, cold majesty that made the Crusader kingdom above feel like a temporary, flimsy shelter. This was the subterranean core of Solomon's temple, the place the Saracens and the Crusaders had fought over without ever knowing its true, magnificent extent. He signaled for the others. One by one, the knights descended, their awe overwhelming their fear. Even the cynical Payen was hushed. "We are beneath the world," Godfrey whispered, his voice booming in the resonant space. "This is no basement, Hugh. This is the belly of creation." Hugh held up the lamp, casting long, dancing shadows. The walls were not bare stone. They were etched, covered entirely with intricate repeating patterns and glyphs, symbols that looked impossibly ancient, predating any language Hugh knew. Eliahu arrived last, and upon seeing the chamber, he fell instantly to his knees, his forehead touching the dusty ground. "The Ohel HaRoch, the tent of Bedrock," he murmured reverently. "This is where the earliest priests studied the cosmic numbers. This chamber is the key." Eliahu explained that the chamber itself was a massive decoding apparatus. The etchings on the pillars and walls were not decoration, but complex stellar maps and mathematical formulas. The true vault, the chamber containing the Ur-Texte, could only be located by translating these patterns to find the exact coordinates. "It will take months, perhaps years, to decode this," Eliahu warned, tracing a line of symbols on a pillar. "The danger is not the digging, Sir Knight. The danger is the knowledge itself." Their mission now had 2 distinct, equally dangerous phases: maintaining the visible shield above ground and prosecuting the heretical excavation below. For the next 4 months, the dual lives of the Templars settled into a grinding, terrifying routine. By day, they were impeccable, almost fanatical in their piety. Hugh demanded the highest discipline. They polished their armor, patrolled the roads relentlessly, and were visibly poor, a deliberate choice to appeal to the simple piety of the common folk and to keep the costumed curiosity of the Patriarch at bay. But the constant scrutiny was wearing them down. The Patriarch's agents watched them with cold intensity, noting their refusal to attend certain sacraments and their near-total silence on their purpose. One morning, Hugh was summoned by King Baldwin. The king was standing near the stables, a look of distinct unease on his face, accompanied by the smug, severe figure of the Patriarch. "Sir Hugh," the king said, his voice laced with forced casualness, "the Patriarch has raised certain questions about your use of my stables. He suggests your order is spending too much time here and perhaps engaging in unusual activities unbecoming of Christian knights." The Patriarch stepped forward, his eyes burning with suspicion. "We have heard reports of unusual noises, Sir Knight, grinding sounds, as if stone is being moved. And the king's stablemaster, Thomas, reports being intimidated by your man, Sir Payen, when he questioned late-night activity." Hugh held his gaze steady, his heart pounding a battle against his ribs. The smallest tremor, the slightest hesitation would be his end. "Your Grace, Patriarch," he replied, projecting absolute devotion, "the noises are the sound of work. We are poor, and we are 9. We cannot afford to buy weapons, so we are forging them ourselves. We are tirelessly grinding the metal for new swords and chainmail in the evenings, using a small, unused mechanism we found in the foundation to power the grindstone. Our poverty forces us to work while the city sleeps. If Thomas was intimidated, it was only by the fervor of my man, who fears the theft of our only tools." He knelt quickly before the king. "We ask nothing, your grace, except the right to arm ourselves to protect your pilgrims. If we cannot forge, we cannot fight. If the church forbids us this basic right, then we must surely disband." The king, who desperately needed reliable knights, and who was loath to cross Hugh, who asked for nothing, looked at the Patriarch. The Patriarch, trapped by the public image of Hugh's profound poverty and devotion, was forced to back down. To forbid the Templars from forging their own swords would be to forbid them from fighting, which would make the church look cruel and obstructionist to the Crusader effort. "Continue your work, Sir Knight," the Patriarch spat out, his voice a low threat. "But know that the church will be watching every piece of iron you strike, and if we find any trace of unauthorized stone being moved, your grinding will stop forever." Hugh returned to the stables, the cold sweat drying on his tunic. They had averted disaster, but the shield was thinning. The Patriarch was focused now. He was looking for unauthorized stone. Hugh knew they had to find the secret quickly and disappear the evidence of their digging entirely. The pressure of maintaining the lie was becoming a deadly weight.
With the Patriarch's scrutiny fixed upon their armory, the Templars were forced to increase their vigilance and deepen their descent into the forbidden knowledge. The narrow passage into the Ohel HaRoch, the Bedrock chamber, became their sanctuary and their classroom. Eliahu, though a fearful scholar, transformed into a severe, demanding priest of a forgotten faith when he was beneath the earth. He understood that the survival of the Order of Solomon depended entirely on the ability of these rough, superstitious knights to grasp a complex cosmological truth that threatens to undo everything they had ever believed. "You believe in a God who speaks through priests and grants power through relics," Eliahu lectured one night, tracing a complex, swirling star map etched into a pillar with a trembling finger.
The lamplight barely held the cavern walls at bay. The 9 knights sat around him, armed but utterly vulnerable to his words. That is the lie that built the Second Temple and funded your crusades. The truth is that the universe is governed by number and geometry, he stressed, using the Greek term gnosis, knowledge. Solomon was not merely a wise king, he was the greatest Gnostic, understanding that the structure of the cosmos could be measured, contained, and controlled through specific ratios. The temple was not a house for God, it was a mathematical apparatus to focus the power of shining force. Hugh watched his men. Godfrey was utterly bewildered, his massive brow furrowed. Payen, the pragmatic Norman, only cared about the practical application. "Focus, Sir Knight," Eliahu snapped at Payen. "The Ur-Texte we seek is not scripture, it is the book of creation. It contains the exact measurements and formulae that allow a man to wield this force. Imagine if you could build a catapult that never ran out of stones, or a shield that no Saracen steel could pierce. That is the profane application. The sacred application is the power to know the mind of the Creator, a power the Church believes belongs only to God Himself." Eliahu then introduced the concept that became the core secret identity of the Templars, the dual purpose. "You are the Knights of Christ above ground, the shield of piety," he instructed. "But below ground, you are the Nivne, the builders, the inheritors of Solomon's gnosis. You must maintain this perfect duality, or both the secret and your lives will be forfeit." This duality manifested physically. The Templars began to adopt specific coded iconography. The famous symbol of the 2 knights riding a single horse was established, not merely as a sign of poverty, but as a representation of their dual nature, the visible, the Christian knight, and the invisible, the Gnostic initiate, sharing the same existence. Hugh, as the master, was forced to undergo the most intense training. He had to learn enough Hebrew and Greek to verify Eliahu's translations and understand the Sefer HaMispar's complex geometry. He was taught to look not at the Christian cross, but at the esoteric symbol of the serpent's seal, 2 intertwined symmetrical opposites, representing the duality of the sacred and the profane, the light and the shadow. The burden of this knowledge began to wear on Hugh. His faith, already cynical, crumbled entirely. He realized that the cause he had fought for, the Crusades, was built on a magnificent, potent lie. He was now dedicated to a greater, more dangerous truth, but one that required him to live a life of utter hypocrisy. One evening, as they were clearing a load of stone, Payen de Montdidier challenged the scholar. "If this knowledge is so powerful, why did Solomon hide it? Why didn't he use it to conquer the world?" Eliahu grew pale, his eyes darting into the darkness. "He did use it, and in his arrogance he nearly destroyed the world. The force is a mirror of creation. It responds to the will of the user. But if used selfishly or carelessly, it causes catastrophic collapse. Solomon sealed it away, swearing his descendants to silence, because it is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. He built the temple to contain the power, not to wield it." The fear in the chamber sharpened. The knights were no longer seeking a glorious treasure. They were guarding a theological bomb. The daily routine of the dig continued, now driven by an increased urgency. The coordinates Eliahu translated from the bedrock chamber glyphs pointed toward a specific axis. They began tunneling horizontally from the cavern floor, digging through layers of dense ancient construction, a process that was agonizingly slow and dangerously loud. To manage the noise, Hugh implemented a draconian schedule. They only dug during the loudest parts of the day above, midday prayers at the dome of the rock, or during the heavy clatter of King Baldwin's stable hands feeding the horses. Even then, they minimized the use of metal picks, relying mostly on chisels and silent, careful work. Despite their efforts, the strain began to tell on the men. The lack of sleep, the constant fear of being caught, and the weight of the heretical knowledge eroded their unity. They were brothers in arms, but strangers in belief. One afternoon, André de Montbard, the quiet, meticulous record-keeper, approached Hugh. He held a small, charred wooden cross, his personal token of faith, in his hand. "Hugh," André's voice was barely a whisper, "I have seen the translations. I know what Eliahu is teaching us. We are not just deceiving the church, we are preparing to commit the ultimate blasphemy. This is not the poverty of Christ, this is the greed of the devil." Hugh looked at the cross. He felt nothing but cold resolve. "We made an oath, André, a blood oath, not to God, but to the truth of Solomon. The church you serve abandoned us here, left us to rot. If that God existed, he would not require us to starve for his glory. This secret gives us power. That power will save this city, and in time it will save Europe from itself. You cannot walk away now. You have seen too much." "Then my soul is forfeit," said André, his voice cracking. He did not ask to leave, but his confession hung heavily in the air. He was a Templar of the visible shield, but an unseen servant of the order. Hugh knew the danger. Internal dissent was a weakness the Patriarch's agents could exploit. He had to remind André and every man that their fate was sealed. "Your soul, André, is my concern now," Hugh said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You worry about the digging. You worry about keeping the secret. Your God gave you over to me the moment your blood touched the stone floor." Hugh looked around the dark cavern, at the vast, silent proof of Solomon's heretical wisdom. They were trapped now, trapped between the visible demands of their Christian duty and the terrifying truth of their secret mission. The only way out was forward, into the ultimate vault. The pressure mounted in a relentless, suffocating wave. Hugh's success in maintaining the visible shield had only deepened the suspicion of the church authorities. The Templars' extreme poverty, coupled with their unshakable loyalty to the king rather than the Patriarch, presented a political and spiritual anomaly that the ecclesiastical establishment could not tolerate. If they could not control the order, they would destroy it. The main inquisitor was Father Etienne, a young ascetic canon dispatched directly from the Patriarch's palace. Etienne was not a warrior. He was a master of psychological pressure, armed with the deadly tools of spiritual interrogation. He began to appear on the Temple Mount almost daily, hovering near the stables, ostensibly performing blessings or distributing alms to the stable hands, but always watching the 9 knights. He noted their rigid discipline, their lack of socializing with other orders, and, most damningly, the intense, almost manic focus in their eyes, a focus that seemed too zealous for merely guarding horses. Etienne started small, interviewing the stable hands, searching for inconsistencies in Hugh's story about the constant metal grinding. He found none. The knights were silent, perfect machines of piety and labor. So Etienne escalated. He began targeting the weakest link, André de Montbard. André's quiet struggle with the heresy had become a visible burden. He was praying longer, fasting more severely, trying to purify a soul he believed was already damned. One afternoon, André was returning from patrol alone when Father Etienne intercepted him near the southern gate. "Sir Knight," Etienne said smoothly, his eyes narrow and clinical, "I see a shadow in your soul that even the Holy Sepulchre cannot lift. Tell me,
Do you struggle with the sin of pride? André stopped, his face pale. I struggle with the sin of failure, Father. No, Etienne contradicted gently. I speak of the pride that leads men to think they know better than the Church. The pride that makes men believe they are chosen for a mission that no one else can understand. The pride of secrecy. Etienne leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Tell me, Sir André, what is the true purpose of the Order? Why does Sir Hugh refuse to account for your nocturnal labors? Do you truly believe that Christ requires you to dig for metal in the dark like thieves? Or are you perhaps looking for something that the Church would deem unholy? The suggestion, delivered with chilling accuracy, struck André like a physical blow. He stammered, crossing himself repeatedly, trying to recall the official cover story. That evening, during their secret excavation in the Ohel HaRoch, Hugh noticed the change in André. The methodical Burgundian was distracted, jumpy, his chisel work erratic. He pulled him into a dark corner. What did the priest say to you? André burst out in a low, desperate whisper. He knows, Hugh. He doesn't know what, but he knows we are hiding a blasphemy. He asked about the digging. He accused us of the sin of secrecy, of pride. I almost broke. I swear, I cannot bear the weight of this lie any longer. You will bear it, André, or you will bear the consequences, Hugh warned, his voice a low, cold vibration in the vast chamber. The next day, Hugh took the critical, terrible measure. He knew that the only thing holding the Patriarch back was the lack of evidence. André, while fundamentally loyal to the men, was a walking, ticking confession waiting for the next encounter with Etienne.
The safety of the Order, the preservation of the secret, and the lives of the other 8 men outweighed the life of one compromised brother. This was the dark necessity of the unseen Order. Hugh feigned injury during a routine patrol. He called André to a secluded stretch of road near the city walls, claiming he needed help examining a flaw in his saddle strap. Payen de Montdidier, silent and professional, rode just behind them. When they were alone, Hugh turned to André, not with anger, but with an appalling sadness. André, you are a good man. Perhaps too good for this cause, Hugh said, his eyes hard. But the priest has touched your soul. He will break you. If you break, the secret is revealed, and we all burn for the greater blasphemy. The visible shield is nothing without absolute silence. I swore an oath to the secret of Solomon to protect it at all costs. André looked at Hugh, his eyes filling with sudden, awful comprehension. He didn't fight. He only nodded once, a gesture of resignation to a terrible fate. Forgive me, Hugh. Forgive my failure. Hugh turned his face away. He did not want to look when Payen rode up swiftly and expertly snapped André's neck with a practiced, brutal motion. It was quick, silent, and horrifically final. André de Montbard, a founding Templar, was dead, sacrificed to the need for absolute secrecy. They staged the scene meticulously, a flash raid by Saracen bandits, the body stripped of valuables, a final, necessary lie to cement their cover. Hugh returned to the city, his hands clean, his soul stained, and delivered the tragic news to King Baldwin. The king offered condolences and noted the ever-present danger on the roads, a danger the Templars were supposedly there to counter. The Patriarch, however, was not satisfied. He used André's death as an opportunity to intensify his probe. Father Etienne descended upon the remaining 8, demanding to know the exact nature of André's final confession. Hugh faced Etienne in the armory, the place of their supposed metalworking. "Sir Hugh," Etienne pressed, his voice full of pious concern. "Did Sir André confess to any heresy before he died? Was he driven to despair by some unholy vow you forced upon him?" Hugh stood tall, his sorrow manufactured but compelling. "Father, André's only confession was his despair at his poverty. He spoke of the shame of having nothing to offer God but his broken life. If there was a secret, it was only that he felt unworthy to wear the cross." Hugh delivered the final, calculated blow that turned the Patriarch's probe against itself. "But, Father, if you are so concerned about the sanctity of our mission, I have a question for you. Why did André die on a road that your patrols were scheduled to guard? We are poor knights, tasked with duties that your wealthy canons shun. If you truly wish to stop the shame of death on the pilgrim roads, then send us more men, or better, secure us a permanent public commission sanctioned by the Holy Father himself. Stop your probing and begin to help." The strategic challenge worked. The Patriarch's public image relied on appearing supportive of the Crusader cause. Hugh had forced the Patriarch into a corner. Continue to spy on the knights or legitimize them? The killing of André, while dark and necessary, achieved its immediate purpose. It instilled a terrible, chilling silence among the remaining 7 knights, demonstrating the absolute finality of their oath, and it bought Hugh precious time. He returned to the Ohel HaRoch that night, his face grim. Eliahu and the others waited. "André is gone," Hugh announced simply, not looking at anyone. "The probe is blunted. We have perhaps 6 months of clear sailing before the Church can launch another serious investigation. Eliahu, you must locate the vault. We must find the relic now. We have paid too high a price for this digging to fail." The remaining 7 Templars returned to the dust, the pressure of the impending conflict now internalized. They were bound, not just by an oath, but by a shared, terrible crime, committed for the sake of an ancient secret. The excavation became a frantic race against the clock, fueled by guilt and the primal fear of exposure. The excavation continued for 2 years, a silent, exhausting saga that tested the limits of the 7 remaining Templars. The guilt of André's necessary sacrifice fueled their frenzy, while the sheer physical labor of digging through the bedrock nearly broke them. Their public identity as the poor Knights of Christ grew stronger with every successful patrol, becoming a legitimate, respected shield visible that few would dare challenge. But beneath the ground, the 7 men were consumed by the unseen order. In the deep, resonant darkness of the Ohel HaRoch, Eliahu and Hugh finally translated the final sequence of glyphs, an astrological and geometric key tied to the precise moment of the temple's original dedication. The coordinates pointed to a single, unremarkable pillar in the far eastern end of the chamber, where the supporting bedrock was fractionally thicker. It was late spring in 1109. The city was restless, with rumors of an imminent Egyptian counterattack on Ascalon. Hugh knew that soon King Baldwin would call upon every available man, ending their period of quiet digging. It was now or never. They worked on the designated pillar for 72 hours straight, fueled by desperation and thin wine. They used slow, continuous chiseling, muffled by damp cloths, removing the outer layer of carved stone to reveal a circular, metallic seam embedded directly in the bedrock. "This is it," Eliahu whispered, his voice catching. "The final door. The metal is iron, infused with strange alloys. The Sefer HaMispar describes a complex lock, triggered not by a key, but by a combination of pressure and sonic vibration, a locking system designed by Solomon himself. Using the geometric formulas provided by Eliahu, Hugh fabricated 3 heavy, stylized bronze pegs. He inserted them into specific depressions around the iron circle and, following Eliahu's frantic instructions, struck them in a specific rhythmic sequence. The results were astonishing. Instead of a loud clang, the metal seam emitted a deep, sonorous hum, a resonant frequency that vibrated through the bedrock and into the bones of the men. With a slow, grinding sigh that seemed to last an age, the circular section of iron dissolved back into the rock, revealing a small, perfectly square vault door made of polished, obsidian-like stone. Godfrey let out a primal yell of triumph, muffled quickly by Hugh. They had done it. Hugh and Eliahu approached the vault. The obsidian door was cool to the touch and covered in symbols that were far older and more potent than anything in the Ohel HaRoch. Eliahu read the inscription aloud. Keter Yisrael, the crown of Israel. Only those bound by the oath of the builder may enter. Hugh pushed the door. It slid inward with surprising ease, revealing a small inner chamber, dimly lit by the ancient force of the vault itself. Inside, resting on a pedestal carved from pure black rock, was not a grand relic, not a gilded ark, but a simple polished scroll tube made of hammered electrum, a natural gold-silver alloy. Next to it lay a single perfect crystal orb, vibrating with an unseen energy. The first relic, Eliahu breathed, utterly overcome. The Ur-Texte of Creation is contained within the scroll tube. The crystal orb is the lens, the key to unlocking the true power of the Gnosis. As Hugh reached for the Electru scroll tube, the midpoint reversal struck with terrifying violence. Above them, the quiet of the night was shattered by the distinct, brutal sounds of a Saracen counter-raid. It was not a small skirmish. It was a massive, coordinated attack, focusing entirely on the Temple Mount. Hugh heard the screams of the king's stable hands, the terrified whinnying of horses, and the unmistakable, high-pitched war cries of the invading soldiers. They had been discovered, not by the church, but by a different, older enemy. Hugh spun to Payen. "Get up there, secure the stables. Godfrey, stay here. We must secure the relic." Godfrey, always the most volatile, looked from the scroll tube to the entrance of the tunnel, torn between the physical fight and the philosophical imperative. Before he could decide, a figure stumbled down the passage covered in blood, one of the Templars who had been securing the surface entrance. "Master," the man gasped, collapsing. "They are everywhere. Nizari, assassins. They knew exactly where to strike. It's a full raid on the Temple Mount. They are trying to breach the mosque structure." This was the terrifying realization. The attack was not random. It was a targeted extraction attempt, launched by the same shadowy forces that had assassinated Rabbi Shimon. They had tracked the Templars' activity, perhaps through a remaining spy in King Baldwin's court, and were making a final, desperate move for the secret. Hugh grabbed the electrum scroll tube. "Eliahu, take the crystal." They scrambled out of the vault chamber, sealing the obsidian door behind them. As they did, a group of 4 Saracen soldiers, not regular infantry, but hardened, agile men bearing the distinct markings of the Hashshashin, slid down the main well shaft, having overpowered the guards at the surface. The fight in the deep cavern was brutal and desperate. Hugh, Godfrey, and the 2 remaining men fought with the fury of trapped animals. The Saracens were fast and expert with curved blades, but the Templars were protected by heavy steel. In the chaos, one Hashshashin broke past Hugh, sprinting towards Eliahu, who was clutching the crystal. "The scholar!" the assassin yelled in Arabic. "Take the scholar!" Godfrey reacted instantly, throwing his great body in front of the slight scholar. The Hashshashin's dagger plunged deep into Godfrey's abdomen, sinking past the chainmail where the plates met. Godfrey roared, crushing the assassin's skull with the pommel of his sword, but the damage was done. He collapsed, clutching his wound, his blood rapidly pooling on the ancient stone floor. Hugh fought with savage desperation, dispatching the remaining assassins, the electrum scroll tube heavy in his hand. The chamber was silent again, save for the frantic, panicked sounds of the fighting above and Godfrey's ragged breathing. Hugh knelt by his friend. His eyes were unfocused, glazed with shock. "Hugh, we got it. The secret. It's safe."
Hugh looked from his dying friend to the electrum scroll, then to Eliahu, who was weeping silently, clutching the crystal. The shield visible had cracked. The price of the unseen order was being paid in blood. "We must move," Eliahu urged, pulling on Hugh's sleeve. "The Temple Mount is lost for now. We must save the relic and the knowledge." Hugh made the agonizing choice. He could not save Godfrey. He could only avenge him. He could not allow the secret to fall into the hands of the assassins, nor the knowledge to be destroyed by the ensuing chaos of the battle above. "Payen!" Hugh roared up the shaft to the remaining men. "Secure the well shaft. Bar the passage. We are abandoning the mount. Get the horses and meet me at the gate of Zion. We are leaving Jerusalem." Hugh de Payns, Grand Master of an order that had just secured the most destabilizing secret in history, had to flee the very city he had sworn to protect, leaving a founding member to die on the bloody floor of the Bedrock chamber. The midpoint reversal was complete. The goal had been achieved, but at the cost of their base, their safety, and a brother's life. The secret was secured, but now they were hunted and exposed, forced to carry the truth of Solomon back into the heart of Europe.
The withdrawal from Jerusalem was a chaotic, humiliating scramble. Hugh de Payns and the remaining 6 Templars emerged from the well shaft into a city consumed by fire and panic. The Saracen raid, focused entirely on seizing the Temple Mount structure, had been repelled by the quick reaction of King Baldwin's meager garrison, but the cost was high. The stables were burning, and the air was thick with smoke and death. Hugh had the electrum scroll tube, the Ur-Texte of Solomon, secured in a canvas pouch strapped tightly beneath his tunic. Eliahu, pale and terrified, carried the crystal orb, its unseen energy pulsing faintly in the gloom. They rode 2 horses abreast, the symbolic representation of their poverty, now a practical necessity. They met Payen and the remaining 4 men at the gate of Zion. Their horses were spent, their armor singed, and their mission utterly compromised. The shield visible had failed its first real test on its home ground. "Godfrey is dead," Hugh stated, his voice flat, allowing no time for grief. "He bought us this time. We use it. The assassins know what we were digging for. The Patriarch will use this disaster to blame us. Jerusalem is no longer safe for the secret. We are going to Europe." The decision was brutal but necessary. They couldn't hold the Temple Mount, and the discovery of the Ur-Texte required a complete political reset. They had to secure the Order's survival and the relic's safety by gaining the one sanction that superseded King Baldwin's authority, that of the Pope. The road out of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was a gauntlet of danger. They traveled light and fast, moving through the dangerous foothills of the Levant, constantly scanning the horizons for Nizari scouts, knowing that the assassins would stop at nothing to recover the knowledge. They successfully booked passage on a small, fast Genoese trading vessel sailing from Acre. Hugh paid the captain an outrageous sum, not in coin, but with a magnificent sapphire he had been saving for his eventual return home, a final sacrifice to the Order. The sea voyage was the longest, most torturous leg of their journey. Crammed into the hold with Eliahu and the relic, Hugh spent weeks in perpetual motion, the sounds of the churning sea mocking the deep silence of the Ohel HaRoch. He used the time to interrogate Eliahu further, desperate to understand the full magnitude of the power they carried. "The knowledge within this scroll, what happens if it is used incorrectly?" Hugh asked Eliahu, holding the electrum tube, a simple, unassuming vessel for utter world change. Eliahu, weakened by the fear and the rough travel, spoke with the dry clarity of a dying oracle. "The Ur-Texte contains the formulae for bending the 4 pillars of creation. If the measurements are even slightly wrong or the intent impure, the force collapses inward. It causes mass psychic disruption, sickness, and, worst of all, the complete unraveling of matter. It is why the Order of Solomon only served as guardians, never as wielders.
It is not power, Sir Knight. It is annihilation, waiting for a single miscalculation. This confirmation hardened Hugh's resolve. The Templars were not a treasure guard. They were a prison warden for a metaphysical monster. Their failure to protect the relic would not just lead to political disaster, it would lead to a biblical catastrophe. As the ship sailed through the Mediterranean, they were not safe. Hugh caught sight of suspicious figures on 2 separate docks, men whose watched their ship with too much interest, men whose clothing suggested they were agents of the great, wealthy European noble houses who had supported the Crusades and were eager to claim any spoils from the Holy Land. The assassins were one threat, the greedy, powerful princes of Europe were another. By the time they reached the port of Marseille, almost a year after leaving Jerusalem, the 7 Templars were shadows of themselves. Hugh immediately sought sanctuary under the protection of his uncle, the Count of Champagne.
This connection was vital. The Count of Champagne, a powerful man in the French court, was a relative and close ally of Bernard of Clairvaux, the most influential and arguably the most powerful spiritual figure in Europe, second only to the Pope. Hugh knew the key to survival was to present the order not as secretive heretics, but as saviors in need of papal sanction. He met with Bernard of Clairvaux in the solitude of a Cistercian abbey in Burgundy. Bernard was a figure of legendary piety and charisma, a man capable of inspiring entire armies with a single sermon. Hugh had to convince him that the Templars were not only necessary, but divinely inspired. He did not show Bernard the Ur-Texte. He showed him the wounds. "My Lord Abbot," Hugh said, kneeling before Bernard, "we are 7 men. We have lost 4 of our original company, 3 to Saracen blades, 1 to the sheer grinding poverty of the life we swore. We are the only men permanently stationed on the Holy Mount, living in the dirt, guarding the site of Solomon's temple itself. We require a mandate. We require a rule. We are Christ's poorest soldiers, and we have risked our lives to ensure that no evil touches that holy ground." Hugh spoke with a passion born of genuine hardship, if not genuine piety. He spoke of the plight of the pilgrims, the constant threat of the assassins, and the necessity of a professional, dedicated military monastic order that would answer directly to the Pope, bypassing the corruption of local bishops and kings. Bernard, moved by Hugh's raw, unflinching account, and deeply impressed by the simple, powerful symbolism of the order's poverty, took the bait. "You have faced the ultimate test, Sir Knight. You have suffered for Christ, where others have sought riches," Bernard said, his eyes alight with spiritual fervor. "I shall petition the Pope. I shall call a council. We will formalize your rule and grant you the sanction of the Church. You will be the sword of Christendom." The gamble had paid off. Bernard, an engine of spiritual and political power, would be their patron. The Church, which had sought to crush the order in Jerusalem, would now officially sanction and fund it in Europe. However, Hugh knew that papal sanction was only half the battle. They needed official recognition to operate, but they also needed a place to hide the Ur-Texte, a place so secure, so central, that no power on earth could touch it. Hugh summoned Eliahu to the edge of the abbey grounds. "The secret must be secured, Eliahu, before the council meets," Hugh said. "Bernard will give us the order, but Europe's princes will come for the secret. Where can we hide the Ur-Texte so that it is both secure and perpetually accessible only to the Grand Master?" Eliahu, gazing at the stone abbey rising before them, spoke the fateful words that would dictate the Templars' history for the next 2 centuries. "We hide it in plain sight, Sir Knight. The Church gives you land and permission to build great fortresses. You must build your principal vault beneath the foundation of your first great commandery, the chief administrative center of your new order. Use the geometry of the Sefer Mispar to design the crypt itself.
The Templars' greatest strength will not be their armies, but the hidden truth beneath their first headquarters. We must secure it before the Council of Troyes. The stage was set. With papal sanction imminent and the relic secured, they were ready for the final political confrontation that would birth the order into global power.
The Council of Troy convened in 1129, a moment of profound significance for the Church and the burgeoning European political landscape. It was here, in the cold stone chambers of the cathedral, that Hugh de Payns would present his case, secure his papal sanction, and face the final lethal threat to the secret of the unseen order. Hugh and the 6 remaining Templars arrived in France not as beggars, but as enigmatic heroes. Bernard of Clairvaux had done his work magnificently, portraying the order as the purest form of martial devotion, the spiritual antidote to the corrupt, land-hungry European barons who treated the Crusades as a grand land grab. The knights, dressed in their now iconic white mantles emblazoned with a simple red cross, stood out among the opulent robes of the bishops and the silk of the nobility. Their poverty was their armor, their silence their strength. The official proceedings were a formality, orchestrated by Bernard. Hugh presented the rule of the order, a document emphasizing chastity, poverty, obedience, and total dedication to the defense of pilgrims and the Holy Land. The council, swayed by Bernard's zealous influence, ratified the order, granting them the ultimate sanction, direct allegiance to the Pope, exempting them from the authority of any bishop or king. The shield visible was complete and untouchable. But the true council was held in the shadows. After the official decree, Hugh was summoned to a private chamber where he was confronted by a small, powerful cabal of European nobles, led by Count Thibaut of Blois, a fierce rival of Hugh's uncle, the Count of Champagne. Thibaut was flanked by 3 heavily armed retainers and a dark, menacing figure Hugh immediately recognized as a European-based agent of the Nizari assassins, the same shadowy organization that had struck at Jerusalem. The Nizari agent stepped forward, his eyes burning with intense conviction. He spoke in flawless Latin. "The knowledge is too great for men of unstable faith. The Ur-Texte belongs to those who understand the balance it requires. Tell us, Sir Knight, where is the Electrum scroll tube?" This was the ultimate confrontation. The secret was not just wanted by the assassins, it was coveted by the powerful, resource-rich European nobility, who saw it as a means to gain an advantage over their rivals, perhaps even over the Church itself. Hugh looked at the Count, then at the assassin. He needed a sacrifice, a final, absolute sacrifice to solidify the lie and protect the actual relic. "Gentlemen," Hugh said, his voice ringing with cold resolve, "we are mistaken. We found nothing beneath the Temple Mount except dust and the ancient foundation stones. The only thing we brought back from Jerusalem was this." Hugh reached into his breast pocket and produced the crystal orb, the lens to the knowledge, the key, and placed it on the table. "This crystal," Hugh declared, speaking with the measured intensity of a man reciting scripture, "is a key to the wisdom of Solomon, a relic that allows certain insights into the architecture of God's plan. It is a symbol of gnosis, divine insight. The assassins sought it to prevent its power from falling into Christian hands. We secured it. But it is not a weapon, it is a tool for divine contemplation." Thibaut scoffed, reaching for the crystal. "A tool or a trick to distract us?" Hugh stepped back, placing his hand on his sword hilt. "It is truth, Count, but if you seek the scroll, the physical embodiment of the knowledge, you must speak to my scholar. He is the guardian of the final heretical truths." Hugh's gaze shifted to the door, where Eliahu, having been instructed to wait as a necessary decoy, was brought in by Payen. Eliahu understood his role instantly. He was the scapegoat, the heretic who would take the fall, ensuring the order's purity. "Eliahu," Hugh commanded, his voice formal, "show the Count what the Templars truly guarded in Jerusalem."
Eliahu, knowing his life was forfeit, but understanding that the greater secret had to survive, opened his small satchel and presented a different parchment, the complex, dense Sefer HaMispar, the book of numerical codes and geometric drawings, the how-to guide. This book, Eliahu stated, his voice ringing with scholarly authority, contains the true heresy. It claims that the temple of God was built on measurements derived from ancient pagan mathematics, not divine inspiration. It threatens the very foundation of the Christian understanding of creation. I am the last scholar of the Sod Shalomo, the Order of Solomon. I guarded this book, and I believe the true power lies in its destruction. The Nizari agent and Thibault's men lunged forward simultaneously. The assassins wanted the book's knowledge. Thibault wanted the book's political blackmail potential. The confrontation turned instantly lethal. Payen, acting on Hugh's silent command, blocked the Nizari agent, allowing Hugh to engage Thibault's armed retainers. A brutal, silent fight erupted in the small chamber, steel clanging on steel, fueled by political greed and desperate secrecy. In the confusion, Eliahu, fulfilling his final terrible duty to the unseen order, used a small flint and steel hidden in his robes to ignite the pages of the Sefer HaMispar. The ancient papyrus caught fire instantly, burning with a bright, terrifying intensity. The Nizari agent screamed, abandoning the fight to try and save the priceless book, but it was too late. The knowledge, the key to unlocking the power of the Ur-Texte scroll, was rapidly consumed by fire. The fight ended when Payen, with a desperate thrust, killed the Nizari agent. Hugh, covered in sweat and minor cuts, faced the furious Count Thibault, who stood among the burning pages and the dead. "The knowledge is destroyed, Count," Hugh declared, kicking the flaming remnants. "The heresy is dead. The scholar, a misguided heretic, is dead to the world. We brought back only the crystal and the truth that the Temple Mount is dangerous and only a sworn order can keep it safe from those who seek its profane power." The sacrifice was complete. Eliahu, though physically alive, was now declared a rogue, dangerous Jewish scholar who had been secretly using the Templars for his own purposes. The Sefer HaMispar, the roadmap to the real relic, was burned. Hugh kept the final critical relic, the Ur-Texte scroll tube, hidden, known only to him. Count Thibault, though suspicious, had no proof. The book was gone. The scholar, now politically silenced and hidden away by Hugh, was dismissed as a fraud, and the Templars now had the papal sanction of Bernard of Clairvaux. To move against the Templars now was to move against the Pope himself. The climax secured the Templars' future. They were officially sanctioned, politically protected, and their true heretical secret was safe. That night, after the bodies were cleared and the fire extinguished, Hugh visited Eliahu, who was being held in a secret cellar of the newly commissioned Templar compound near Troy. "You saved us, Eliahu," Hugh said quietly, handing him a clean white sheet. Eliahu looked at the sheet, then at Hugh. "I saved the knowledge, Sir Knight. The Sefer HaMispar was destroyed, but the scroll in your tunic still holds the ultimate truth. What now?" "Now," Hugh said, his face cold and hard, "we use the political power Bernard gave us to build the biggest, strongest shield the world has ever seen. We build our first commandery here in Troy, and tomorrow we begin digging the vault to house the Ur-Texte scroll. The Order of Solomon will live on, sealed in stone, beneath the largest fortress of the Knights Templars."
The Council of Troyes was a political and spiritual triumph for Hugh de Payns, but it was not the end of the conflict. It was merely the establishment of a far grander battlefield. With the papal sanction secured by Bernard of Clairvaux, the Knights Templar, the Pauperes Militones Christi Templique Salomonici, exploded onto the European stage. Donations poured in, Land, men, and most importantly, gold flowed into the order, instantly transforming the 7 desperate survivors into the foundation of a new, powerful European entity. The rapid acquisition of wealth was necessary, but Hugh recognized the profound paradox. The shield visible was growing rich, shedding the poor title, yet this very worldly success was the perfect cover for the unseen order. No one would suspect that the richest, most pious military monastic order in Christendom was secretly guarding the ultimate Gnostic heresy. Hugh's primary focus now was the construction of the principal commandery near Troyes, the first great fortress of the order on European soil. Under the pretense of building a treasury and a chapter house worthy of their new status, Hugh oversaw the secretive construction of the vault beneath the foundations. He used the geometry encoded in the fragmented translations of the Sefer HaMispar to design a crypt that was both physically secure and metaphysically contained. The vault was not built using standard Roman engineering. It followed specific, non-Euclidean ratios designed, according to Eliahu, to passively diffuse the shining force inherent in the relic, preventing accidental catastrophic release. Eliahu, now living in strict confinement in a hidden, walled-off section of the commandery's grounds, officially listed as a mad hermit brought back from the Holy Land, served as the unwilling, indispensable architect. "The vault must be circular, Sir Knight," instructed Hugh one night, sketching frantic designs on a sheet of slate in the cellar. "The geometry of a circle, the perfection of the sphere, it contains the energy, forcing it back upon itself. And the entrance must be sealed not with a simple key, but with a dual lock, one physical, one derived from number." Hugh employed the best stonemasons, but only trusted Payen de Montdidier and the 2 remaining original members to oversee the final subterranean work. The vault was finished in secrecy, built 20 feet beneath the commandery's treasury, accessible only through a labyrinthine series of passages known only to Hugh and Payen. The final act of securing the secret was both solemn and terrifying. In the dead of night, Hugh, wearing only a plain linen tunic, descended into the finished vault, carrying the electrum scroll tube and the crystal orb. Eliahu stood above, guarding the access point, his eyes wide with fear and a strange, mournful reverence. Hugh placed the Ur-Texte on the black obsidian pedestal he had retrieved from the Ohel HaRoch in Jerusalem. He placed the crystal orb beside it. He was sealing away the power that could have made him the ruler of the world, choosing instead the complex, dangerous path of the Guardian. "The Order of Solomon survives," Hugh whispered into the cold silence of the vault, "but the Templars will be the shadow it casts on the world." He then enacted the ritual, a mix of ancient Hebrew prayers taught by Eliahu and his own whispered oath, swearing the order to perpetual guard duty. He activated the numerical lock, a sequence of pressure plates hidden in the floor, corresponding to a complex personal code he alone knew, and sealed the vault door. The click of the final physical bolt was the sound of a 2-century-long clock starting its dangerous count. Over the next decade, Hugh's legacy solidified. As the first Grand Master, he crafted the operational structure of the Templars, making them the most efficient, ruthless, and wealthy organization in Europe. Their Templar castles, the commanderies, spanned the continent, becoming the first multinational financial network, all built on the sacred trust earned by their visible piety. Hugh established the dual loyalty, public loyalty to the Pope, to the defense of the Holy Land, and to the collection and protection of Christian wealth. This made them indispensable. Secret loyalty. The Grand Master alone held the knowledge of the vault, the Ur-Texte, and the true mandate of the Sod Shlomo. The Grand Master was not just a military leader, he was the chief warden of the Great Secret. He ensured that all future Grand Masters, while seemingly chosen by democratic election within the order, were always men of similar desperation and cynicism, men who valued power and structure over mere spiritual purity, men he had personally mentored and tested. Hugh brought Eliahu to the temple in Paris, the eventual central hub of the order. The scholar was now truly isolated, hidden within the fortress, his very existence the ultimate secret of the order.
Eliahu, in his captivity, continued to translate the fragments of gnosis that remained, compiling them into a cryptic cipher known only to the master. The forbidden, heretical knowledge was now distilled into a single, terrifying legacy. In his final years, Hugh spent his time in the Grand Commandery, often visiting the antechamber to the vault, listening to the silence that contained the world's most dangerous truth. He looked at the vast financial ledgers, the records of land and power, and the constantly growing armies of knights. They had become the King of France's most powerful creditors, the Pope's most reliable soldiers, and the pilgrims' only dependable protectors. They were the perfect shield. Yet Hugh knew the order carried its own seed of destruction. The immense wealth and power required to protect the secret would inevitably breed jealousy, greed, and suspicion. The very necessity of their power would one day be the reason for their downfall. The lie of the shield visible was too grand, too successful. It was only a matter of time before a king or a pope, unable to tolerate such immense independent power, would seek to break the shield to claim the wealth, never knowing that the real treasure, the secret of Solomon, lay hidden, untouchable, beneath the feet of the Grand Master. This was his legacy, the perpetuation of a lie that birthed an empire, a necessary evil that guaranteed the survival of the ultimate truth.
Hugh de Payns, an old man now, stood overlooking the courtyard of the Paris Temple, the heart of the Knights Templar. Decades had passed since the bloody birth of the order in Jerusalem. He was the Grand Master, the architect of an empire that stretched from England to the Levant, a force so rich and powerful that kings borrowed from its coffers and popes relied on its sword. He was a man universally revered for his piety and military genius, yet he lived the most profound lie in Christendom. The visible shield was complete. The Templars, in their white mantles and red crosses, were the perfect embodiment of Christian zealotry. Their network of commanderies, their flawless banking system, and their formidable armies served as an impenetrable political and financial fortress. This immense structure of wealth and power, however, was merely the intricate, magnificent casing for the small, silent secret at the core. Hugh walked the halls of the Paris Temple, its construction a testament to the Gnostic geometry Eliahu had overseen. The Templars' treasury, the largest in Europe, sat directly above the deepest secret of all. Hugh was visited often by Bernard of Clairvaux, now frail and close to death. Bernard, the patron saint of the order, saw the Templars as the culmination of his own spiritual vision. "Master Hugh," Bernard said one afternoon, his voice thin but firm, "you have achieved God's will. You have made poverty respectable and war pious. The Templars are an unstoppable force for good, a testament to what men can achieve when they swear total allegiance to Christ." Hugh listened, nodding with practiced humility, knowing that every word of praise deepened the colossal deception. He had created the perfect irony of the shield. The sheer size and spiritual conviction of the Templar order was the only thing capable of protecting the truth that the Church was founded on a necessary myth. The vast, visible Christian enterprise was protecting the ancient, heretical Jewish secret. Hugh's only confidant was Eliahu, now a wizened, nearly blind figure hidden away in the temple's interior. Eliahu, too, was nearing the end, his life spent in the service of silent knowledge. "The scroll is safe, scholar," Hugh stated in their final meeting. "The vault holds it. The iron key, the mathematical code to the inner lock, is now sealed in the testament of the Grand Master, passed down only from one master to the next. The others, even the senior knights, know nothing of the true mission beneath the treasury." Eliahu nodded slowly, tracing the serpent's seal on his thigh, a secret tattoo that only Hugh knew about. "The Nivne have survived, master, but the shield you built is too heavy. It will attract the gaze of kings, and they will want the gold, never knowing the fire that lies beneath it.
"Let them take the gold," Hugh replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "The gold is nothing. It is the price we pay for the silence. They will destroy the Templars for wealth, Eliahu, and they will never, ever find the truth of Solomon." Hugh knew the history he had authored. He had secured the secret for centuries, guaranteeing the survival of the Sod Salomo. He had created a temporal power so vast that only the combined force of the greatest king and the greatest pope could ever hope to challenge it. And that challenge, he knew, was inevitable. He had planted a seed of ultimate Gnostic knowledge in the heart of the Christian world and surrounded it with the most zealous defense force ever created. He had ensured that the future destruction of the Knights Templar, the shield, would be the final necessary sacrifice. The public execution of the Templars would be so spectacular, so focused on rumors of idol worship and financial corruption, that no one would ever suspect the real devastating secret they were guarding. The accusations of worshipping the Baphomet, of Gnostic rites, of secret knowledge, all the sensational charges that would eventually be leveled against the order, would simply be twisted, misunderstood shadows of the unseen order that lay hidden beneath the floor. Hugh left the order to be tortured for rumors, while the truth of Solomon slept safely in its geometric crypt. Hugh's final political move was to secure the continuation of the order's mission. He selected his successor, a proven military commander with iron resolve, and in a sacred ceremony known only to them, Hugh passed on the burden, the knowledge of the vault, the iron key code, and the terrifying, lonely mandate to guard the relic. "You are not the sword of Christ," Hugh told the new Grand Master. "You are the jailer of the world's most dangerous truth. Protect the shield until the day it must fall. When it falls, ensure the key survives." Hugh died shortly thereafter, a revered and successful man. He was buried with all the honors of the Church, having lived and died as its most loyal servant, a perfect, unassailable lie. Decades later, as the Templar order grew to its zenith of power, the prophecy of the heavy shield began to unfold. In 1307, the jealous, indebted King Philip IV of France, with the coerced blessing of Pope Clement V, launched the sudden, devastating, simultaneous arrest of every Templar in France. The accusations were lurid and shocking: heresy, sodomy, and the worship of a pagan idol. The knights were systematically tortured, confessing to every lie, every blasphemy the inquisitors demanded. The visible shield was systematically, violently dismantled. But when the king's agents seized the Paris temple treasury, they found gold, jewels, and financial records, but they found no relics of Solomon. They searched for secret idols and found only ritual objects. They searched for the ultimate truth, and they found only the enormous empty space where the Templars' legendary wealth had resided. The king and pope believed the treasure had been secretly moved by the Grand Master before the arrest. They never found the wealth, and they never found the secret. Hugh de Payns' final masterful act of deception ensured that the spectacular public destruction of the Knights Templar, the shield, served as the ultimate impenetrable seal on the secret order of Solomon. The world forgot the Sod Salomo, but it never forgot the Templars. The legend of the order's missing treasure and its heretical secrets only deepened the mystery, ensuring that future generations would search for gold and idols, never for the mathematical truth sleeping in the sealed Gnostic crypt, waiting for the time when a new master, a new Nivne, would find the lost iron key and begin the ancient cycle anew.